So I have been asked to talk about philosophy of electrical engineering education. So I was, I have very huge pile of old things. I now have a problem, I don't know how to throw them. So out of that, I don't know who and how I got this, but this is the third convocation of 1968, all right. And I suddenly realized that if had I studied in this institution, which I didn't, this would have been my convocation. So I am very happy to share with you. It actually has a page called the philosophy, okay, so that suits me very well. And it says, and it starts rather, beyond this support from the physical environment, the institute treasures and endeavors to sustain a climate of inquiry. And it says in the end, this para, IIT Kanpur has been striving to generate this dynamic climate. And how far its hopes have been realized may be judged partly from the pages that follow, and which then describes the making of an engineer. So we have been definitely striving to create a environment. So I was asking myself, what can I tell you? So I first thought, if we are talking about philosophy of engineering education, we should inquire as to where did program in electrical engineering came from. I mean, today you would sort of think that is axiomatic. I mean, there always was a electrical engineering program. That is really not true, not at all true. For example, I know of this instance personally, 1950 or 48. If you were to study in Bombay University, then you could either study electrical and mechanical engineering, or you could study civil engineering in VJTI. That's all.
Electrical and mechanical combined.
Yes, yes. And I have seen the mark sheets, and they are yay long, and they have all kinds of subjects you have never heard of. Okay, so I went back a little further, and if electrical engineering wasn't there, what was it? So I read from our library, which has all kinds of old books, the autobiography of Werner von Siemens, the founder of the Siemens Electric Company. And in his time, when he was a young man, maybe around early 1800s, you could do two things. You could either be a civil engineer, or you could be a military engineer. So, and you didn't pass an exam, entrance exam, to get into engineering. You had to produce a recommendation, all right. So Werner von Siemens' father knew a lieutenant colonel in the German army, and so they approached him, and he gave him a letter of recommendation, and he was admitted to the military academy, okay. And it is the military academy which did things other than civilian work, okay. The civil here means civilian work, houses, roads, sewage, stuff like that. Whereas the military engineering was slightly more esoteric. They would fortifications. You know what a fortification is, killa. So they would make fortifications, they would lay a siege, they would defend a siege, they would cast guns, they would have siege engines which will throw stones, they will have fire, things which throw fire, and exciting stuff like that. Okay. There was of course no telegraph. Siemens had not invented it as yet. So our tradition is tradition of military engineering, and it is because the guns, rifles, when they were invented, handheld muskets in Jahangir's time, siege towers, flamethrowers, all these are complex mechanical devices. So therefore, a facility with machines is what military engineering required. All right. So that is the origin of it all. A lot of you might have heard this. Guns are sort of they guns and gunpowder, which has started from Arabs and started from China, came to Arabs, came to Europeans, and guns have played a very important role in many battles. For example, siege of Vienna by the Turks in 1648, and in our own country, you very well remember the origin of 1857 war is a gun. And in fact, the loss of 1857 war is also because of the Enfield rifle on the English side, which was very new at that time, and the Brown Bess, which was on the side of the rebels. So Enfield rifle had almost double the range of the Brown Bess, and hence the result. Invention of electricity is somewhat relatively recent, all right, starting from charges. Of course, a lot of people have known atmospheric electricity from very old times, because this is a atmospheric phenomenon everyone can see. But the systematic study of electricity has only started somewhere around 1500. So my favorite sort of mental model, as one would say, is that the electricity rose as the Mughal Empire fell, and when the Mughal Empire was gone, electricity was very much there. All right. So round about 1700, 1800 is when people have sort of tamed electricity. They have in 1800s they have battery and they have static electricity generating machines which will generate sparks and so on, and of course all kinds of people who would claim miraculous properties of electricity. There have been crooks of all ages, so there have been crooks in that age also. So they would advertise, you know, you would take electric charge and it shock and it will do such and such thing for you, cure diseases and so on. So it has an extremely colorful history. So in so you would say I would say 1950 is about the time when you would have a degree or a diploma in electrical engineering. Before that, maybe a few places, maybe in London, I don't really know, but in our country for sure. Now, if you were having a degree in electrical engineering in 1950, you are really you are one of the pioneers. This is certainly true of VJTI and in perhaps University of Roorkee also. I have not checked that. But now when you are starting, we have electrical and electronics, electronics and communication, communication and instrumentation and communication. Really very amusing to see this list. But the electronics part for sure has come about rather recently, because at the beginning of 20th century people were still trying to invent electrons. So I would say a degree in electronics did not come about for another 10 years, and then you started hearing about really telecommunication, and perhaps after that electronics, somewhere around that. The telecommunication has a very colorful origin as well, because need to communicate is very original and very pervasive. So one would talk about all kinds of devices, smoke signals, scout flags, mechanical arms. In fact, France was completely covered by lines of mechanical arms through which they would signal to each other. In some parts of Bihar you can still see the smoke towers which the Mughals used to use from one hilltop to another. I saw a few in Bokaro. Then there were, of course, talking drums of Africa, which are very famous, because when the English penetrated jungles of Africa, they found the natives were not that stupid, because they, despite the river and the swamps, they could communicate to each other very effectively by talking drums. Okay, and everyone understood what the drum was saying, except of course the Europeans who were traveling on the boat, which was an added advantage to them. The talking drums are actually quite a sophisticated device. Then of course there is the telegraph and the telephone and the computer and the internet. You have sort of seen it, maybe not as at some point you would be attached to this. So considering that we now have both of them, in our such a diversity, there is or choices of instruction, it is really very challenging to construct a syllabus which would satisfy everyone. So don't be disheartened if there is lot of discussion and debate when you are trying to form a syllabus. That is almost natural. And then of course you can also so what do we do? How do we have how do we cope up with this? Because people go on developing new things. So what we need to do is to, I'll banish the civil engineer. What we need to do is to have a broad plan, and then be willing to revise it. This is extremely important. In fact, there have been very many sort of revisions in this institute. This is done every 10 years, so I have seen a few of them, and they all look very similar. Like I have a booklet or courses of study, as it is called, from 97 and then 2003, and they all roughly look the same, at least in electrical engineering. So we have a broad plan, and then we are willing to revise it. In fact, sometimes we are sort of very unwilling participants to this revision, because that has been forced to us from the from the government, like what happened when we went from 5-year to 4-year. This happened just when I was like you, and it was quite traumatic because everyone thought that the 5-year program was very good, which indeed it was. I probably sustained it for maybe 5 years, no more than that, and then we had to sort of go to a 4-year plan. So, and then every 10 years we are sort of re-looking at it. So, revision does not necessarily mean that we are doing drastic changes, but we should be willing to revise it depending upon what the current situation is. And this is extremely important. In fact, this is the only way of sort of coping up with the changes. So, this certainly is true. And then of course, I would always remind everyone, this is about, somebody asked me about a syllabus. So, I told him, no matter what syllabus you make, if a Master G is standing in the front, he can only teach what he knows. What he doesn't know, he obviously cannot teach. So, therefore, don't be sort of too fussy about the syllabus. You can make a broad plan, and then you leave the rest to Master G, because he is incapable of teaching your syllabus. He can only teach what he knows, obviously. So, the Master G, on the other hand, like you, should remember, and then I have often seen this, when the Master G grows old, and then he becomes somewhat impatient, and he says, you don't even know this. What the Master G is forgetting is that he is in the same class for last 25 years. Okay, whereas a student is there only for 1 year at most, and then he is coping up with 5 other courses, of which Master G has absolutely no knowledge. Okay, not even 1 lecture he can give. So, we should be sort of generous to the ignorance of our students. They do seem very foolish when they are in front of you, but they are actually not that foolish, as you would find out few years later. So, something that you can keep in mind. So, in all these things, what we have been consistently doing, which is our broad plan sort of goes like this. We have, whether we have 4-year or 5-year, doesn't really matter. We would divide our program roughly in 2 parts. In 5-year it was 2.5. In 4-year it is 2. What we will call a core program. Okay. So, this would be done by all students, irrespective of their branch, and then we have a departmental program. So, this is the broad division. We have always followed it. Okay. We got this roughly from we were aided by a consortium of some dozen American universities or so, and there used to be a red book of the American Society of American Society of, I think, Engineering Education. So, they had a standard called the red book. So, they brought their red book with me, with them, and then people looked at it and they formed a program. So, the core program is, we could say this is a common core program, and then of course, there is a departmental program. In our case, that will be electrical engineering. Now, in many institutions, the electrical engineering department is separate from electronics department, but really they are quite closely connected. Sometimes they are sharing resources, sometimes they are sharing teachers. So I'll sort of club them all together. So our core program, of course, contains all sciences. There are courses in physics, chemistry, mathematics, etc. Our contribution to this, in fact, our contribution is quite steady for the last 50 years. So this is, we have basic sciences. If I were to roughly put it, we have engineering sciences. This is another category. Then we have technical arts, as it was called, technical arts. So the technical arts includes programming, includes manufacturing, includes things which are sort of not science but are closer to engineering. Then interestingly, we have a strong humanities content in there. This content is not small. It is 15 to 20%, and we got lot of support for this from the employers, who felt that this was a very important part of the entire program. And this has many things. This has languages, this has electives which students take, and we have faculty members in philosophy, in sociology. We now have a department of economic sciences. We used to have economics, but I think this is now called economic sciences. So it has sort of grown bigger. We also have a large facility in arts. People actually teach drawing and design, so arts and design. That is also a big part of this. And over the years, I have talked to many students, and they a lot of them felt that they were very happy, and they found this very useful. We also have psychology. So we have psychology, we have sociology, we have philosophy, we have arts, we have, of course, have languages and so on. So there are a lot of them. The electrical part in here comes in engineering sciences. So one of the characteristics of our program is that it is science based. So we have lots and lots of हो गया time? Okay. Okay. So over here we have one course in electrical engineering, and we have one course in electronics. And the rationale for this is generation, transmission and distribution of power. This is generation, transmission and distribution of signals, so to say. So the end product of this is energy which you can convert to mechanical form mostly, or chemical form. The electronics is slightly more subtle. You are generating and transmitting only information. So the information is consumed at the end, and it is generated somewhere in the front. So these are our two courses of which we have a commitment over here in the core program. In the departmental program, what we have done is divided it in two parts, the third year and the fourth year. And the fourth year is all electives, and the third year this one, is not completely frozen. We have certain courses in the beginning which are compulsory. Interestingly, everyone learns power system, everyone learns communication theory, everyone learns a little bit of microelectronics, and even here we have course in circuits, which Professor Venkatesh has taught many times. We have course in microelectronics over here. We have course on control over here. So we do have interspersed in here certain courses. Then we do have programs which are dual degree. Interestingly, these are very popular dual degree programs, and so a person gets a BTech and a MTech, and he spends 1 year extra, so 4 + 1, and we have a dual major program in which a non-EE student does 100 credits, and he gets a degree in electrical engineering in addition to whatever he already has started on. So these are the dual degree program is very popular for various reasons with both students and their parents. I can tell you many stories about it, but this roughly is what it looks like. A commitment in the core, certain basic courses which are at the second year level, more compulsory courses which are at the third year level, but we do have electives in the second half of year. These are let us say limited electives. These are from a basket, limited electives, so that a student can sort of make his choice as to what he wants to pursue over here in this part. So these sort of are linked, his choices over here are linked to what he will finally do. We do not have interestingly, we do not have compulsory summer training, but a large number of students find some project or the other to do, sometimes in India, sometimes in Europe, sometimes in the US, and they keep themselves busy. The traditional round of factories which actually constituted the summer training is still, I believe, is quite useful, but there are too many students and not enough factories, so a lot of people don't particularly get round to this. All right, so I think with this maybe you can ask me whatever questions you have, and then we can take our program further.
Thanks to Professor Joshi.